We are officially less than 1 week away from the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft. What the Jets will do with the number 7 overall pick continues to be the hottest topic among New York Jet fans, but let's bring on an expert to discover what the Jets should do with the number 7 overall pick. That is Devin Jackson of the Philadelphia Inquirer, who will be joining us right here, right now on this Thursday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. Let's go.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer, and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
What is going on, everyone? Hello, and welcome back here to another edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. Appreciate you all tuning in here on this Thursday, April 17th, 2025. Make sure you all smash that like button and hit subscribe. It's completely free, and it helps us grow significantly here on the show. That's free, so make sure you do that. But the paid way helps us grow just as much and get into our membership raffle. Every membership gifted or $2.99 super chat will get you a raffle entry. Prize we're giving away this month included Don Maynard signed photo, Joe Klecko signed helmet, Joe Namath Super Bowl III replica ring, a CJ Mosley signed jersey, a free item from our merch store, and a channel emoji. Make sure you get in on that if you haven't already. Appreciate all your support. As always, throw all your questions in the chat. If you want to call into the show, you could do so with the pinned comment at the top of the chat. But joining me right now, one of the best draft analysts in the business, someone whose work I've been following now for over a year, so super happy we are able to get him on the show. That is none other than Devin Jackson of the Philadelphia Inquirer, who was kind enough to spare some time for us and grace us with his presence here on the program. So, Devin, appreciate you as always, and how you doing?
Doing great. Week out from the draft and really looking forward to being there in Green Bay. We talked a little bit about it off the air, but looking forward to being on site and taking it all in and seeing all the reactions from the first round of the 2025 NFL draft. But thanks so much for having me on, Connor, and happy to be here.
100%. And Devin, one of the biggest wild cards you mentioned, obviously you'll be in attendance for the draft live in Wisconsin, but one of the biggest wild cards seemingly is the New York Jets with the number 7 overall pick, just because you look at this team last year in this spot. It was the Brock Bowers and the Olu Fashanu debate. The fact that the Jets had the all-in mentality, they had the roster at this point last year that they were Super Bowl ready, just put all the weapons around Aaron Rodgers. They ultimately chose to build the wall and secure the depth with Olu Fashanu, which ultimately helped paying off after Tyron Smith had nothing short of a disastrous season with the Jets in 2024. But now you look at this team and they can go in so many directions with so many holes. Obviously, Armand Membu, Tyler Warren, if the Jets do stick and pick at 7, those seem to be the two consensus favorites. But even we're hearing if Ashton Genty slips past Vegas and he's on the board at 7, the Jets could potentially look to wheel and deal and send Breece Hall somewhere. He only has 1 year left on his rookie contract. My question to you is, what do you think the Jets will ultimately do with the number 7 overall pick? We've heard the trade down possibilities. We've heard Armand Membu, Tyler Warren at number 7. What do you think the Jets do? Is it a trade down? Is it a stick and pick? Where does Gang Green go from here, Devin?
Yeah, I think you got to evaluate all your options if you're the Jets. And first of all, I think you see what the trade offers are, if they are trade offers. But I look at this team as one that I don't think they're going to be ready to compete next year. So I kind of dissuade from even the Ashton Genty talk, just because I feel like if you're going to take Genty in the top 10, you have to be ready to compete next year or within the next few years. And I think, it's hard to say that the Jets will be ready to make a championship push, will make a playoff push just even next year. But I think when you look at, what Aaron Glenn wants to build identity wise, I think trenches makes the most sense in the fact that there is a big drop off after the first round tackles. And I think when you look at Tyler Warren as a potential option, I think he makes a lot of sense for the Jets in terms of upgrading the tight end position, being a dynamic weapon. But if you're looking for the Jets, I think you want to shore up your offensive line for the next 4 or 5 years. You have a guy in Olu Fashanu that is going to be ready to start next year. He got some experience this past season with some of the injuries the Jets had at tackle. And then you look at Armand Membu, and I think he's just a great fit for what the Jets want to be. He's a really good run blocker, aggressive run blocker, a guy that can handle his own and the pass protection sense. So to me, I guess kind of my philosophy and my thought process is you're not a team that's ready to compete next
Yes.
year. Why don't you figure out your trenches first and then figure out the rest later, and figure out like some of the other pieces maybe around Justin Fields starting next year. And I think you can get a tight end on day two as opposed to taking Tyler Warren on day one and then maybe have to scrambling and figure out if you're going to be able to find a star level tackle or right tackle on day two of the draft. So to me, I'm in the Armand Membu, I guess crowd and taking him at number
Mhm.
7 overall. And I just think more for the long term outlook for the Jets, I think that will be a better investment as opposed to taking Tyler Warren and maybe you don't get the best out of him because of you're still trying to figure out what your offense is going to be.
And I get what you're saying there 1000%, Devin. I seem to align a little more with the Tyler Warren crowd, just given the fact that Olu Fashanu was selected in the top 10 last year. I think you have your bookend left tackle. I think again, I don't think Carter Warren or Max Mitchell are going to do anything for this team. I just think you look at them as complete flyers. I really, really like some of the day two tackles, matter of fact. Ozzie Trapillo from Boston College, someone who's big body, 6'7", 6'8", over 300 pounds, is going to be great for you in the run game. Came from a run heavy scheme at Boston College. Ariante Ursary is someone the Jets held for a top 30 visit from Minnesota. If he's still there at 42, he could certainly be an option for the Jets. I just think the biggest thing is getting pass catchers for Justin Fields, because Justin Fields is, when you look at this overall, this scenario that Justin Fields has with the Jets, his skill set is more than potentially just a bridge option. He hasn't put everything on tape that indicates he's going to be a franchise quarterback for an NFL team. But among all the options the Jets had after moving on from Aaron Rodgers, Justin Fields has the best chance to be that long-term guy. And I think to give Justin Fields a fair opportunity and give him the best chance to win in New York, you have to surround him with other pass catchers. And I think Tyler Warren is someone you could bring in who, yes, I do think his technique could use a little refinement at the NFL level, talking about blocking here, but someone who's going to be a receiver for you, someone who can be somewhat of a safety net for Justin Fields. And I think that's what this team needs, getting a pass catcher in round one to place next to Fields to help optimize his success and then deal with right tackle in one of the later rounds. I mentioned Trapillo. I mentioned Ursary there, Devin. Let's say the Jets do elect to go the Tyler Warren route or at number 7. Any other guys on day 2, day 3 as tackles you could see the Jets potentially coveting?
Yeah, when I look at this tackle class, I think it's really up to figuring out like are these guys projections? Are these guys ready to play right away? Do you see him as more of as a guard or tackle? And I think you brought some great names in terms of Ursary. I think he's a guy that's been a little bit underrated in the process. I do wonder for his sake, at least, is he going to be there at 42 when the Jets pick next at 7 overall? I think he's a guy that can go a little bit earlier than maybe people are expecting. But if you want to go more the developmental route, I think a guy like Charles Grant from William and Mary is a guy that makes a lot of sense as a potential day 2 guy. Maybe not at 42. That might be a little rich just because he's a small school tackle. But you look at his movement skills, his ability to cut off backside defensive lineman. He's a really raw athletic talent. A guy that can come in, has a wrestling background. I know a lot of coaches love when offensive tackles have that wrestling background. He's a guy that you can sit there and develop a little bit, and maybe let him go through some of the growing pains of playing right tackle at the NFL level. So I think he's an option. I know a guy that had a hot, kind of his name was hot at the start of the draft process. Is kind of cooled off. Cam Williams, the right tackle from Texas, a guy that's really a big, massive size, really aggressive blocker, a guy that maybe is not the quickest in terms of getting into his pass sets, and maybe his foot speed isn't as quick as you would like. But I think he's a guy that has the tools. He's only 21 years old, only had a real 1 year of starting experience at Texas, more of a reserve up until this past year. And I think those two guys, if you don't go tackle on day 1, I think those guys are or likely day 2 options. And we'll see with Williams. I think he's more maybe at that third round area. And then I'll go to Emory Jones, the LSU right tackle, a guy that didn't have the greatest season this year, playing opposite of Will Campbell, a guy I think has some technique issues to clean up. But you saw the raw talent, especially down at the Senior Bowl. I thought he really showed what he can be at his peak. A really solid starting right tackle. Some are going to project him the guard just because of his run blocking ability and his ability to move guys off the spot. But if you view him as a right tackle, I think he would make a lot of sense in round 3.
Yeah, that's interesting because there's some other names we've heard tossed around. Wyatt Millum is someone who catches my eye, but again, at the same time, you have to make the argument. I think that's someone who's going to play guard at the next level. So I think one of the biggest things for this team is trying to identify someone who's going to come in and be that bookend right tackle for you, especially if you want to take him in one of the first 2 rounds. That's my whole thing with Will Campbell. Like, we're hearing Will Campbell now as an option for the Jets, and it's always, well, the worst case scenario, he's your, starting guard of the future. I don't want to take a guard with the number 7 overall pick, and I don't want to, again, like I said, Devin, I'm more in the pass catcher Tyler Warren boat than the build the trenches right away in the first round. But if you're going to take an offensive lineman in the first round, it has to be Armand Membu. I just don't get the fascination with drafting someone who has short arms, who doesn't have any experience at right tackle, you taking him in the top 10 and trying to test your luck, converting him to the complete opposite side of the line. I just don't get the logic there. So Will Campbell in the first round, certainly no for me. Cameron Williams is an interesting one. I think he, like you mentioned, Devin, only 1 year of experience as a starter at Texas. So certainly raw, needs some more time to develop. I still have my eyes set on a guy like Josh Connerly Jr., guy like Ariante or Sriazi Trapillo. Those are the 3 guys I really like kind of in that early day 2 range. Speaking of, late day 1, early day 2 targets, something I noticed with the Jets top 30 visits is they kind of I wrote this up for jetsxfactor.com. One of the things they kind of gravitated towards are these projected late first round, early second round defensive linemen. They hosted Darius Alexander, Michael Williams, Derek Harmon, all 3 of those guys. They had them in Florham Park for an official top 30 visit. My question to you here is, do you see those guys being available at 42? And if not, could you see the Jets potentially trying to make a move from 42, either the back end of the first round or early second, to try to land one of those guys?
I think of the 3, the most likely one to be there is probably Darius Alexander, mostly because of his age. I think he's 25 years old, and
Yes.
a guy that obviously he did a lot of great things at Toledo, but and we saw Quinyon Mitchell go first round last year, but I don't think he's nearly the athlete. Even comparably to what Quinyon Mitchell was, and I think with Darius Alexander, he's going to be a really good 3 technique at the NFL level and show some ability to rush out to the 5 technique and as a standard defensive end. But I don't think he's a first round caliber guy yet. I think he's going to be there at 42. And I don't think he's a guy you necessarily need to trade up for, just because I think he's going to be down there, probably the 6th, 7th defensive lineman taken off the board, just because of how good this interior defensive line class is. So I would bet that he's more of a guy that you stick and pick at 42, as opposed to like Michael Williams and Derek Harmon. I think Derek Harmon's probably going top 15. Would be my guess right now. There's a lot of buzz in the league that he's going to go high, and I could certainly see it. And I think the talent is there. A guy that can rush the passer, be a run stopper, play multiple alignments down the defensive line. But I think Harmon is going to be long gone at 42. And I think Michael Williams is probably the most interesting case of it. We've seen guys and athletes of his caliber go inside the top 15, top 20. I think his evaluation has been a little interesting in terms of, like, he wasn't fully healthy last year, had tightrope surgery in his ankle. A guy that is a really good run defender right now, but as a pass rusher, he still probably has a ways to go to become, a consistent pass rusher at the NFL level. But I think he's a guy that ultimately, probably, if he doesn't go top 15, top 20, I will be hard pressed to find a guy, a team that doesn't take him before the end of the first round, at least take a flyer on him, especially a playoff level team that maybe have a plan for him to develop a little bit. Maybe he's an early down player early in his career, and before you start to give him more and more snaps as you go along. But of those 3, I think Darius Alexander will probably be the one available at 42.
Back to number 7 overall, Devin. Armand Membu, Tyler Warren. Broke down both sides of that debate. Those consensus favorites, like those, and then we heard Will Campbell as kind of the outlier there, and I broke down why I just don't think that would be a smart move, a great move for the Jets if they wanted to draft Campbell in the top 10. From maybe people you've spoken to, from what you've been hearing, is there anyone you view who might be just a complete sleeper option for the Jets at number 7 overall? Because while Membu and Warren seem to be the favorites, no one knows what Darren Muji's philosophy is as a general manager. No one knows what Aaron Glenn's personnel philosophy is as a head coach. And from the people you've spoken to, from what you've been hearing, is there anyone you could view as potentially a sleeper, someone Jets fans should keep their eyes peeled for in number 7?
For a while, I thought it might be Will Johnson before kind of everything that's popped up in terms of him not running and not testing and some setbacks he's had
And
throughout the
signing Brandon
process.
Stevens in free
Yeah,
agency
yeah,
certainly
that
didn't
too
help
as
that
well.
cause.
So it seemed like corner might be the early move for the Jets early on, at least. But I'm starting to think that's probably not really an option. I think if you want to go the pass catcher route, maybe a Ted McMillan via a trade back might be an option for you for the Jets. Get another pass catcher, big body receiver. A guy that can play opposite of Garrett Wilson. I think he's a guy that I think the Jets like and seem to be interested in, at least from what I've heard. But in terms of just the other options, I don't think there's a ton of other options outside of that, at least within the top 10. I think if the Jets end up trading back, I think that opens up your options a little bit, because likely at that point, if they trade back maybe 3 or 4 spots, it's a likely chance that Membu is gone. At least one of Membu or Warren are gone.
Yeah.
Will Campbell is likely off the board too. So then you open up some more discussion and maybe some other guys that you might be interested in. But I think right now they will likely be locked in to Membu, Warren. It's the top 2 options. Obviously Campbell is going to be in the discussion, even though I don't think he's going to end up a New York Jet. And then I think Ted McMillan is a guy I probably say right now, at least as an option. And then, I thought about some of the other corners, would they like Jahdae Barron?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I think it really depends on how they view him. If they view him more as a nickel, probably not. If they view him more as an outside corner, maybe you like him enough and you just pick him and try to figure it all out later. But I think right now I'd probably add Ted McMillan as a potential possibility.
Devin, I love Ted McMillan as a prospect. I think he could be a perfect fit for the Jets. And this is the funniest part. Everyone was so concerned about his speed and the fact he wasn't running at the combine, and then all eyes on him at his pro day, and he runs under that 4.6 mark. From what we saw, it was in that 4.47 range to kind of early 4.5. So not in the complete danger zone of running a 4.6, a 4.7, which most people felt. So boom, is his speed great? Absolutely not. Is it a massive concern? I don't think so. I think it's somewhere in that middle where it's not something you need to, really, really worry about if you want to draft him, but it's not something that you're drafting him for. You're drafting him for the fact that he converted on 60% of his contested catch opportunities last year. He's someone that big-bodied, 6'5", 212 pounds, come in, play opposite Garrett Wilson, reliable red zone target for Justin Fields. I think this is the player the Jets should really, really be interested in, and a trade back would make a lot of sense now that his stock's beginning to fall. But again, this is a move I wouldn't be opposed to at number 7 overall. So loving the Ted McMillan hype from you, Devin, and I'm hoping that could potentially be an option for the Jets. But if you got any questions for us, throw those in the chat. Call into the show with the pinned comment. Devin and Connor here with you on a Thursday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. Brandon Newsome comes in, says leave the top 10 with either Membu, Genti, or at least one premium draft asset via trade back top 75 future. Anything less is a colossal failure. Thoughts, Devin?
Yeah, I mean, it's look, the draft is not a sure thing, and I definitely get the sentiment that you want one of those top potential blue chip prospects. But I also think you want to make sure that you get multiple players that you can sit in, that you can develop, by the end of their first contracts, and be able to build depth along your roster. So I think, you want to be able to get a really good player. Obviously, inside the top 10, you're picking in the top 10. You want to get a really productive player as well. And look, like I said, the draft is no sure thing. Even if you do trade back, there's no guarantee that the guy that you do end up selecting in this draft or the next few drafts end up panning out. So I think it's all about making sure you get quality guys in the building, and build out from there, and make sure that you have a plan for those guys too. Because half the battle is getting the guy there and getting the right fit, but also them performing on the field, and panning out, and being able to fully develop them, and to the best of their abilities, and put them in the best position to succeed.
100%. And before we keep going with your questions, I want to just pivot off the draft for a quick second and address something that happened earlier today on the Pat McAfee show. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, Devin, this guy has been driving me crazy. Someone who I did not want back on this team after we know all the excuses of the coaching, the fact that he was playing hurt. He couldn't beat a top 10 defense last year. He measured out to be a bottom 10 quarterback in this league. You were due to pay him $48 million. He's over 40 years old. No, thank you. For me, it is so funny for those watching to listen to the difference of when he's on the Pat McAfee show talking, when he's wearing a Jet uniform and when he's not. My favorite quote was, obviously, they've got a lot of problems over there that they need to fix. Who was one of the main culprits behind those problems? Aaron Rodgers. Going out there and saying they made me fly across the whole country to, find out that I just wasn't going to have a job. And then let's say the Jets handled it over the phone and they called him. Aaron Rodgers, the whole narrative would have been going on the Pat McAfee show today and saying, oh my God, well, the Jets didn't even have the audacity to tell it to my face and fly me out to New Jersey. I wanted to address that, guys, quickly. I'm not talking about Aaron Rodgers ever again on the show. The only time I'll be talking about him is when Aaron Glenn's defense forces 3 interceptions against him at MetLife Stadium, week 1 of Monday Night Football when he's a Pittsburgh Steeler. So just wanted to address that, but no more Aaron Rodgers talk here on this show. We'll go over to a Chiefs question here, Devin. Our Chiefs fan, King Jamie the Mad, says, Connor, I'm seeing more and more Chiefs podcasts coming around to see how Trayvon Henderson fits perfectly in Andy Reid's system like Jerick McKinnon. I might just be onto something. Devin, you got any thoughts on King Jamie the Mad's comment here and how Travion Henderson would potentially fit with the Chiefs?
Yeah, it's interesting. They brought up Travion Henderson because he's a guy that seems like he's going to go in the first round now, and a guy that's really been trending up boards. And I've heard and have seen the Denver Broncos at 20 really like him and really like what his skill set and what he brings to the table. So there's a chance that he might not even make it at 31. For the Chiefs, at least at the way it's trending right now. Obviously, Genty is going to go in the top 10 or 12. Amari Hampton probably is going to go first round. Not sure exactly where, but he seems like he will. So Travion Henderson might be the third guy from the running back class going the first round. I like his skill set. I think he's a guy that is going to be a really sound pass protector. Especially on third downs, a guy that can go out of the backfield and catch passes as well, and kind of be a matchup nightmare in that department. And he's a really good runner. I don't think he's a breakaway speed type of player where he's a one cut and go. He's not. I think he's a little bit different as opposed to a guy like Breece Hall who can really hit home runs in the running game. But I like Henderson, but at least the way it's been trending the last week or so, there's a good chance he's not even there at 31.
Okay, Caden comes in the chat, and Devin, obviously you cover all things Eagles for the Philadelphia Inquirer, so you might have an answer here. He says, what do you think the possibility of a Jets trading for a sixth-round pick for Dallas Goedert? What do you got there, Devin?
Yeah, the Eagles have been looking to trade him for about 2 months now, and been looking for potential trade options. And look, I don't think it would be a bad thing for the Jets to try and swing on him. I think he's a guy that he's a really talented player when he's on the field. He's missed games the last few years with various injuries. So I think that would be the one concern. Are you going to get a full season out of him? But in terms of run after catch ability, blocking in the trenches, he's certainly an upgrade for what the Jets have right now on the tight end roster. But I think he's a guy that's probably going to be, in the discussion, maybe a top 10, top 15 tight end for the next few years before he probably is, going to be, probably more of a role player at that point. But again, like I said, if he's healthy, certainly would make a lot of sense. I just don't know long-term health-wise if he's going to be a guy that plays a full 17 games and he's looking for a new contract. So I think that's a caveat. It's that if you're going to trade for him, he's also looking for a new contract as well.
That again, that's the one massive concern. Getting him on the field in that new contract. I've said all along I would be in on trading a day 3 pick for either Goddard or Mark Andrews in Baltimore, who also seems to be on the trade block. I just again getting tight ends in here who have had some sort of proven success at the NFL level, I think is a big thing. Jets' two main tight ends on the roster, and Stone Smart, Jeremy Ruckert, haven't combined for 650 receiving yards. They've each been in the league for 3 seasons. That's troubling if you ask me. I think you need to get legit wide receivers in the building, especially when Tanner Engstrand and the Detroit Lions use Sam Laporta 86% of their offensive snaps. You need a proven tight end in this building, and I think trading for one of those veterans could certainly ensure that for your team. I know we got a few minutes left here with Devin, so we'll take one more question, then we'll go to the phone lines. David D says, Devin, which guard prospects do you believe will be drafted in round 1?
Let me see.
Tyler Booker's the one we keep hearing.
Yeah, I think the league is a little split on Tyler Booker just because he's not really a guy that's going to move out in space super well, not a guy that moves extremely well laterally. He's not really a top flight athlete, so I could see him going probably more in the second round range. I think Ray Zabel probably makes a compelling case. But again, I think he's another guy that maybe is being pushed up a little bit of the board.
Senior Bowl
Just
was
in terms,
crazy.
yeah, and I think that's part of it. And usually, feels like with small school prospects, FCS prospects, we're talking about them more on day 2. I know Cole Strange a few years ago went round 1 surprisingly. So I think Ray Zabel is probably a decent bet to go. I would say probably other than that, I probably will rank it Gray Zabel 1, 2, probably Donovan Jackson. I think he has a good chance to go late first round. And then 3 Tyler Booker are 3 potentials, but I think probably the most comfortable I feel in terms of a guy that's actually a true guard at the NFL level. I think probably Gray Zabel is the most likely one that I feel good about. I would say probably 2. I think Zabel and Donovan Jackson, I think, have a good chance of both going in the first round.
One more quick one for me here, then we'll go over to the phones. Our guy Chase comes in, says, hey, Connor, writing an article on the league winners about Mark Andrews' trade destinations, and you mentioned him for the Jets. What would make him a great fit, and what could the Jets potentially give up for him? First off, Chase, I saw you texted me earlier. Sorry, I've been super busy. I got to get back to you after. What I think about Mark Andrews, what they could give up for him, I think it would either be a 2025 fifth. I think either a fifth this year or a fifth next year would be a fair asking price for someone who I think has an $11 million cap hit this year. Certainly not a cheap option, approaching that 30-year-old range. I think it would be a great fit, Chase, pretty much for what I just listed. A proven veteran who's, he hasn't been the healthiest guy, but he's able to get you 10 to 15 quality games per season. This is someone who's going to be a receiving threat for Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields needs another offensive weapon, somewhat of another safety net alongside Garrett Wilson. I think Mark Andrews could provide that for the Jets and then you give up a day 2, day 3 pick in exchange. The way I view it is I don't think you're getting a tight end better in the 5th round than Mark Andrews. So I'd be more than happy to trade a 5th, maybe even a 4th round pick for Andrews. Appreciate you hopping in, Chase, but let's go over to the phone lines. My co-host of the Next Gen Jets show is on the line. Our guy, Chris G, the ultimate Aaron Rodgers truther, is kind enough to join us today. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well. What's up, Connor? What's up, Devin? First thing I guess I'll address about the show. It's been a great show. Shout out to you guys for putting this on our feed every day. It's something great to watch. But the first thing I'll address is Aaron Rodgers. I know no one wants to hear me and Connor go back and forth about Rodgers anymore. But the only thing I'll say about that is the Jets screwed my guy Rodgers. I guess that could be the end of the discussion. But Devin, I know you cover Philadelphia, so you're very familiar with how important it is essentially to build around the trenches. But also, since covering the Eagles, you don't really know what it's like for a team to be so barren of pass catchers and weapons. So at this point, that's why I think it's so important that the Jets go a guy like stick and pick Tyler Warren at 7, or if you want to trade back maybe with the Steelers and get a couple of maybe a first round pick in 2026, and you can get your wide receiver too. But I think it's so important that the first couple of picks in this year's draft go to offense. I'm not really focused on premium positions, which is why I'm willing to take Tyler Warren at 7. I'm focused focused on the premium needs that we have and just getting the best possible player to come in and fill the holes that we have. So that's why Tyler Warren is a premium player that fills tight end hole. And you can get your tackle in round 2 or maybe even round 3. But I'm comfortable taking a tackle that late because Tyler Warren, even though he needs his blocking technique needs refinement, as Connor will mention, um, he's still great, and he can help your right tackle that you would draft in the later round, to come in and just block. So that's where I'm at, taking pass catcher over offensive lineman or trenches.
Devin, what do you got there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I love Tyler Warren. I got to watch him a couple times in person, covering Penn State, and I had him as tight end 1, back in the fall. I thought he was a really special player, and really is a special player. I don't think you can go wrong here at tight end or tackle, or you go tackle and then pass catcher. You want to be able to have guys that can contribute from day one, and guys that have that elite skill set. And I think Warren does. He's a really good pass catcher. Show some promise as a run blocker, even though he's not fully refined in that department. And I think it will be. I will feel pretty good, about Tyler Warren getting selected at 7. To me, it's just more of the trench aspect, just because I know, like, it'll get dicey a little bit on day 2 on who is available at offensive line, because at some point we're going to have an offensive line run. It might be at the end of round 1, heading into early round 2. And if you're in the Jets' perspective, you just don't want to be in that case where maybe you're reaching on a guy that's not going to be able to start for a year or two, in having to take a guy for the sake of taking a guy. So I think either way, as long as you have a plan and maybe you're willing to trade up in the second round to get an offensive lineman, if you see a guy that's falling that maybe should have been a first rounder, or at least in that conversation, and you're willing to make those aggressive moves, I think you're on the right track. But I think either way, you can't go wrong taking Tyler Warren or Mom Mimbu at 7.
Yeah, 100%. What I think about that, though, is I think ultimately if Travis Hunter is off the board, the Patriots will seriously consider selecting Membu. So let's just say Membu is not available. At that point for the Jets, your offensive, your O-line options are Tyler Campbell and Kevin Banks, the guy from Texas. I wouldn't feel comfortable taking either of those. Obviously we have the Jets, in our scenario, we have all our offensive line basically filled. The only, hole, if you will, is right tackle. But the rest of our offensive line is, average, and that average is slightly above average range. Obviously, guys like AVT are really good, and Joe Tippmann, our center, is still ascending. So, we wouldn't need guard, and I would feel uncomfortable trying to move Will Campbell from, to play guard to tackle. So, I don't really think you're getting the return on investment there for pick 7. It's taking an offensive lineman.
Appreciate the call, Chris, as always. Great points. Appreciate you sparing some time for us. Devin, I know we're running short on time. Do you have you for a couple more minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it. Our guy David D, got to shout out our Lions fan for coming in with 10 gifted memberships. David, you're the best. 10 raffle entries for you. Appreciate your support as always, guys. If you can, super chats, memberships really do go a long way here on the channel. So, David, you're the best. Appreciate your support as always. Christopher comes in with another Philadelphia-based prospect. What are your thoughts on Jalen Reed, Penn State safety, as a prospect for our New York Jets? Keep in mind, local visit with the Jets just a few weeks ago as well.
Yeah, Jalen Reed's a really good player, and really helped elevate that Penn State defense this year when Kevin Winston Jr. went down with an injury earlier in the year. And he's played a couple of different roles at Penn State. He played a little bit more of the lion role, which is kind of the nickel safety hybrid in past years. But this year took more of a safety role, a true safety role, and you saw the ability, what he can do coming down to the line of scrimmage, making plays at the line of scrimmage and in the running game. He also is a guy that can play that robber role, where he takes away the middle of the field, passes and concepts, and able to turn them into turnovers. So he's a guy I think this probably best playing more near the line of scrimmage, playing more of a strong safety role, where he's a guy that's going to play in that middle of the field area, play in the box on running downs, and kind of be that extra defender. I think he can clean up his tackling a little bit. I think sometimes he kind of reaches for guys more than wrapping up and securing the tackle. But in terms of a guy that has the ball skills, that has turnover production, and a guy that's a pretty good athlete. I think he ran a 4.47 at the NFL Combine. He's a guy that I really like, and really like his ability. I think he makes sense as a 3rd or 4th round pick.
And then we'll wrap with this one. Another one from Christopher says thoughts about our NY Jets drafting Hollins Pierce for a right tackle. This is someone, Devin, another athletic freak, a combine warrior, someone who's just absolutely ripped and Rutgers kid, local. I was looking at like some of his blocking grades. I've watched a little of them, haven't watched a ton. Maybe if you get a right tackle in one of the earlier rounds, you bring him in 6th, 7th round option as a camp body. Wouldn't hate it given his freak athleticism.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think is going to be more in that developmental range, and I think ultimately it's going to be about can he handle speed rushers on the edge, just because I think he was like 350, 360, like massive player. He's a guy that has an incredible story. I think he came to Rutgers almost 400 pounds.
Yep.
And then slowly took down weight over year over year. And I thought he had his best year and most consistent year this year for Rutgers. The running, he will certainly be an upgrade in terms of as a run blocker. I think that's his biggest strength right now, overwhelming guys with his size and strength. I think the biggest issue for him starting at the NFL level is going to be able to handle some of the speed on the edge, and some of the susceptibility that guys can beat him on the inside track. I think that's where you're really going to start and see maybe. I'm not sure he's going to be a guy that can be a long-term starter. I think he's going to be more of a depth piece ultimately, and a guy that builds out your depth along the right tackle. But I don't think he's necessarily a starting option that you would take. But in terms of taking him in on day 3 in the 6th or 7th round, he would certainly make a lot of sense.
Devin, can't thank you enough for hopping on with us. As always, can't thank you enough for sparing some time. The final question I asked to every single guest I have here on the show, kind of outside the box. If you had to pick any historical figure, you could take 4 of them out to dinner. Who would those 4 people be?
Ooh, this is a tough one. Let me think. I would say Michael Jackson for sure.
Ooh.
Just because I love his music,
Mhm.
and just his, global appeal, his, just how great he of a singer he was, entertainer. I would love to sit at the table and ask him about, his career and some of the things he was able to do. So I would say he's probably near the top of the list in terms of people that I'd love to have dinner with. I'll go Calvin Johnson from the Detroit Lions.
Oh,
He's a guy that was kind of a big impact on me because I played football growing up in college,
what
and
position did you play?
I played tight end and defensive end.
Nice.
Um, so Calvin Johnson is a guy that's probably one of my first favorite NFL players, like not of a team that I was rooting for growing up. I grew up a Saints fan, so
Mm.
I just always had this visual of him on the goal line and people like double teaming him. And it just like it didn't make sense to me at the time, because I was like 10, 11 years old, but like that type of gravity. And I remember he played at Georgia Tech as well back in those days. I just love the player, and I don't really know a lot about him off the field, because he played for Detroit for so long, and
Retired early,
you
yeah.
know, yeah, retired early. Detroit wasn't hardly good in his career, so you really didn't know a lot about him in terms of who he was, and you learn some things as he was finishing up his career. Like I remember hearing about, him not being able to get out of bed some mornings because he was so sore and beat up from football. But in terms of like his personal life and who he is off the field, I'd love to learn more about him. So that would be my top 2. Let me see. Third, I would probably say Stuart Scott,
Okay.
former ESPN broadcaster. He's a guy that's really influential in my journalism and broadcast career. A guy that just so unique in the style, the delivery, being himself, and such a legend as well. I would just love to pick his brain about how he
For sure.
approached his job. Obviously, he passed away, early
While
from.
ago, yeah.
Yeah, and I read his book and just know so much about him, reading about him. But I'd love to talk with him in person, and I like to think that he'd be such a great resource to talk to and bounce ideas off of, and so many other things. So I would say those were probably my top 3.
Devin, can't thank you enough for sparing some time. You got any final thoughts here before we wrap up?
Yeah, look, I think the Jets are in a good position and picking at 7. There's a chance that two quarterbacks go inside the top 7, and whenever quarterbacks go early, it tends to push people off the board. And there's going to be teams behind the Jets too that might want to get a little aggressive for a quarterback. Say if Shador Sanders doesn't go 3 to the Giants. Could the Saints trade up, ahead of them? Could some other teams trade up? And it's going to shuffle a lot of different players that there's a good chance that the player that the Jets want is there at 7. So I'm excited to see what they end up doing. It seems like it could be one of those two players, but you never know when it comes next Thursday night. They could end up taking someone else and someone completely off the radar that we're not thinking about right now.
Devin, you're the best. Appreciate you as always. Everyone, thank you guys for tuning in here on this Thursday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. Back tomorrow night, 8 p.m. as always, same time, same place. Appreciate your support. As always, he's Devin Jackson, and I'm your host, Connor Long, signing off here on NY Flight Jets Talk. JETS, 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 Jets.